9:09, you're listening to BBC WM, and on the breakfast show every morning between 9 and 10 we're asking an expert to answer your questions about the coronavirus outbreak. Today we're talking about the strain the lockdown might be putting on your relationship with loved ones. Are you getting ratty with your other half? Or if you're living apart, are you struggling with how much you're missing them? Maybe parenting is becoming more difficult with that added challenge of homeschooling. Well, here to answer all of our questions is relationship counsellor Jim Lucas, who runs his own private practice, Openforwards, in the Jewellery Quarter. Give us a call, 08081 00 9956 if you've got a question for Jim, or you can text us to 81333. Start your message WM. And Jim joins us now. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Very, very difficult time for families at the moment, I'd imagine. Is that what you're seeing, Jim?
Definitely. I don't think anyone has been in this kind of situation before, and we're all trying to just work out how we get through this day to day, I think.
And what are the most common problems that you're hearing about or that you can envisage in your role?
Common problems, I guess. Well, people are bound to be in different sets of circumstances, like you were describing a moment ago. Some people might be in each other's company throughout the whole day, and they're just not kind of used to that. And probably people are seeing their roles colliding, and they're just not used to kind of that happening. You know, people's parenting, their partnership and their work are just kind of all kind of happening in the same space. And so there's that loss of separation between those things, and that loss of privacy. And I think this can be very stressful for people because we're just not used to this. And I guess kind of when we're stressed, we're more likely to kind of react in ways and kind of maybe be more short-tempered and less patient with people.
And, of course, we're also lots of parents out there are having to cope with homeschooling their children, which is something that most parents never expected to have to do, and dealing with all of that and that dynamic within the relationship where you're no longer just a parent, you're a teacher as well. That must also cause problems, Jim.
I think it's a lot of pressure. You know, I'm in that situation. I've got my two children at home, and trying to do my best to help them kind of still have some, you know, still learn some things throughout the day. But, you know, I'm not a teacher, so I don't really know what I'm doing there. I mean, yes, there's a load of stuff, isn't there, that schools are putting up on their websites and that people can access around the internet, and that's all very helpful. But it's also a big challenge to just kind of keep them stimulated and keep them sort of interested in doing that kind of homework, I think.
And I would imagine that there are lots of parents out there at the moment who are feeling sort of inadequate as well, not up to the challenge, despite all of the wonderful resources available to them.
Absolutely. I mean, and why wouldn't we feel inadequate about it? I think to expect that we're going to be experts in that and that every day is going to be a breeze is just kind of unrealistic. So I think there's something that if we are putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to be that way, that we try to scale back our expectations. People's kind of education is going to slow down here. And in fact, we're kind of seeing that everywhere, aren't we? So maybe there's kind of less pressure to sort of keep up with the level that kids would have been, doing at school.
And also there are those of us with elderly parents as well. I mean, my mum's 82 and she lives by herself. I can't go and see her. I can't hug her. I can't spend time with her. And that, again, is another set of pressure that we're living under.
It is, isn't it? And it can be very upsetting that you don't get to see your parents. I mean, Mother's Day must have been very challenging for a lot of people. And that's just one day, and then we've got all these other days just kind of going through, and we don't know when this is all going to kind of reach a normal period. And so it's very difficult, isn't it, being separate from your parents when you're used to seeing them all the time.
Well, Jim, I would imagine we're going to get loads of people getting in touch on this because our relationships have all been affected, whether we live alone or we live with other people, have all been affected by the current situation. So stay with us, Jim. If you have a question for Jim, then please give us a call. Jim, we've had a text from Caroline in Walsall. She texted 81333, started the message WM, and she says, it's only been 2 weeks and I'm sick to death of the sight of my husband. We've only been married for 18 months. We haven't got any kids, but I'm worried that our marriage won't last another 18 months. Jim, this must be a fairly common one. Couples who are used to a particular routine suddenly thrust together. It doesn't always end well, does it?
No. And I imagine this lady and Caroline and lots of others are anxious about, will kind of, how will the relationship kind of look at kind of the end of all of this? And yes, it is amplifying, isn't it? Those issues that kind of have already been there, or we're seeing different sides to our partners that we didn't kind of used to see. I guess there's a potential really for it to bring people closer as well, and that might be brilliant. And then, everyone's a winner, but it also may be, like Caroline is suggesting, is that it kind of makes you feel more irritated and possibly leads to kind of more conflicts between you. And I guess kind of there's a couple of things, isn't there? There's how you can get some time for yourself that's kind of separate, so that you're not always kind of in each other's pockets, and that's probably really good for you in that context as well. But there's also kind of being able to sort of, I guess, trying to be more sort of patient with each other, because as we get more stressed, we're bound to kind of lose our temper more quickly. And it's a really sort of testing time, like you say, but where we can be more patient with people and let those smaller irritations go, that's probably going to do wonders for our relationship.
It's so difficult though, isn't it, Jim? I mean, I've been married and I remember, the little tiny things that used to drive me mad about my ex-husband and partners I've had subsequently to that. And when your life changes and you're stuck together, there are no kids to distract you or anything like that, it can be so damaging if you're feeling irritated permanently with a person that you're having to spend all of your time with.
Absolutely. And so there's maybe some conversations to have, but trying to sort of have them in a calm way, because I guess kind of when we're stressed here is that there are sort of three basic needs that we all have as human beings that we're really sort of struggling with at the moment, and that's to feel safe, to have good human connection, and to get satisfaction. Now, we all feel less safe than we used to, because when we go out, everybody else feels like they're a potential threat in terms of spreading the virus. And so this is kind of increasing our adrenaline, our anxiety. And obviously then if we're stuck in a house where we're not able to see like friends and family that we normally feel kind of stronger connection with, then that kind of ramps up our adrenaline and our anxiety even more. And equally, we might not be able to find so many things as satisfying. So it's really important that we just try to turn down that anxiety and that adrenaline. And so we might be more likely to kind of have raised voices as we get more irritated with people, and more likely to kind of sort of shout or criticize or blame. But all that stuff is really just going to make it worse rather than better. So where we can sort of soften our voices and tone down the way that we talk to people, I think, although that's very tricky, it's also probably going to be more helpful.
And people, let's face it, Jim, have got a lot of time to practice that at the moment. And that's the key, isn't it?
Yes, we certainly have, haven't we? Yeah.
It's that tone of voice, and it's the way you speak to people the people that you love most when you're irritated. And you're absolutely right that being aware of that and being aware of the way that you're speaking to people, to your loved one or your loved ones, if you can just be aware of that and then sort of temper your attitude slightly, that can be tremendously helpful.
I think so. And if you're recognising that your irritation is really high or you're feeling really frustrated and angry, sometimes that might not be the best time to say what you want to say. because what we're likely to say is going to come out wrong.
No, I found that's absolutely the best time to have a go at someone. That's how come I'm divorced. I'm only joking, Jim.
I'm sorry, cut out there, Samantha. I didn't hear what you said.
No, I was just saying, when you're feeling irritated and angry, it's the best time to discuss something with someone. No, it isn't. Not at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes, people need to see that you're angry about something, and that can be useful too, can't it?
Not necessarily when you're maybe cooped up together, but thank you for that, Jim. Jim is staying with us until 10 o'clock this morning. So if you've got any questions for him about your relationships and how they are being affected by the lockdown, then give us a call, 08081 00. Right, we've had a text from Jill in Kings Heath, and she says, my son is a nightmare. He's 17, and she says, I can't keep him in. So presumably he's going out and seeing his friends, whether he's going around to other people's houses or not, I don't know. But dealing with a stroppy teenager who can't go out must be really challenging at the moment, Jim.
Yes, and my children aren't that old, so I can't say that I'm a parenting expert when it comes to teenagers. But I guess kind of when they get to that age, you lose much more kind of influence and control over kind of over what it is that they can do, what it is they do. So it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think sometimes when people are that age, they feel that they're a bit invincible generally, but kind of invincible to the coronavirus because we're talking about vulnerable groups being much older, but also it's important, isn't it, that they know that they're not kind of invincible, or there's a potential for them to really be harmed. And I think also there's helping them kind of tune into something about how dangerous it is for them to be out for other people. I think that sometimes people just don't realise that they can spread it very far. And if we can help people understand that, by going out, they might be making it more likely that someone they really care about then gets seriously ill. That might be one way of talking to somebody.
And of course, it's trying to remain, and we mentioned this, didn't we, Jim, in the previous question, where somebody had been married for 18 months and was finding it really difficult to be stuck inside with their partner. It is all about sort of taking a deep breath and trying to be reasonable, whereas before you might have had a bit of a shout and a yell at someone. You can't really do that when you're cooped up because nobody can leave to let off some steam. So it's about, I guess, adapting your own attitude, which is so difficult.
It is, isn't it? And, it's easier as a parent probably to kind of do that. But, when you're a teenager, it's much more difficult, isn't it? And you really kind of want that freedom. And you don't want to be kind of restricted, and your parents telling you that, you shouldn't go out, you have to kind of stay in. So I can imagine that those sort of conflicts are kind of just happening more often and more frequently. And maybe it does come back round to what we were saying, that, like you say, is if we can slow it down and we can try not to react sort of quickly, and take a deep breath and try and understand, why is it so important for them to go out, and trying to have a softer, calmer conversation about that may open up something different.
Thanks for that, Jim. And Jim, the flip side of it, and it's a situation that I know a couple of people are in. So you're in a relationship with somebody, and maybe it's just a very new relationship, or maybe that you have to live separately because of kids. You've both got separate families. How much of a strain is that on a relationship? And how do you keep a relationship going like that without doing anything drastic, like moving in together, which could be premature?
Yeah, it is difficult, isn't it? And I imagine there are lots of people in situations like that where they're not able to be together. I mean, we're calling this social distancing, and it's a bit of an unfortunate phrase because really what we're talking about is physical distancing or distant socialising. We actually want people, and it's important for us, isn't it, to remain in contact with people. And connection is fundamental to our kind of well-being, isn't it? And it's important to try and keep that going despite not being able to kind of see each other in person. And I guess trying to come up with different ways to keep talking, to keep kind of doing things together. You know, when we're in a relationship and we've got freedom of movement and to see each other, we don't just talk to each other, we do things together. So maybe there's a chance here to get creative about kind of the things that we could do together as well whilst being in separate places. Like, I don't know, maybe playing games together online or watching the same film together or, you know, cooking the same meal but in different places.
And do you think those sorts of relationships, I suppose it depends on the relationship, doesn't it? But do you think once this is all over, having done all of this groundwork and not actually physically being together, so not having sort of a physical relationship in that sense, but actually sort of doing little things together that are possible when you're both online, do you think that's a good foundation for a relationship once this is all over? It seems to me that actually it could be.
I think you're onto something there. I mean, if we've had very little contact with somebody that we're in a relationship with for several weeks, months, then maybe it's really hard to come back together when we can. But if you keep it going now in small and regular ways, then it communicates something. It tells the other person that you care, that they continue to be important to you, and that is going to be remembered when we come to the end of this.
Jim, thank you so much for your expertise this morning. That's relationship counsellor Jim Lucas, who runs his own private practice in the Jewellery Quarter. You've been brilliant. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Jim.
Thanks very much.